For months, the soundtrack to my workday was the infuriating ping and clatter of a digital pinball machine. It wasn't coming from the arcade down the street, but from the office of my senior partner, Julian. While I was drowning in architectural blueprints and stress-testing structural models for our firm, Julian was chasing high scores on a game he'd installed the day he arrived. He was a master of delegation, which is a polite way of saying he'd slide a mountain of his work onto my desk with a charming smile, then retreat into his office to the sound of virtual flippers. Our boss, Mr. Albright, only saw Julian's smooth presentations and confident handshakes, never the late nights I pulled to make his empty promises a reality. The breaking point came during the Sterling Tower project. It was our biggest contract, and I was single-handedly managing the load calculations while Julian was supposedly liaising with the client, a task that apparently required the constant rhythmic tapping of a pinball wizard. I walked past his office and saw him reclined in his chair, feet on his desk, completely absorbed in the game, while my email alert chimed with yet another urgent request from the client he was supposed to be handling. In that moment, a quiet, cold fury settled in my chest, and I knew I couldn't just complain. I had to do something Julian would never see coming. That night, I stayed late, fueled by stale coffee and a burning sense of injustice. I didn't know much about coding, but I knew my way around digital assets. I found the pinball games installation folder, a relic from a bygone era of software. Instead of messing with the application itself, I located the main graphics file, the one that held the image of the game's primary table, full of bumpers and lights. I opened it in my high-end design software and went to work. With surgical precision, I found a single, insignificant pixel in the darkest corner of the image, and changed its color value to something the game's ancient engine could never process. It was a digital needle in a haystack, an invisible corruption. Then, using a system utility, I reset the file's modification date to match the original installation, erasing my digital footprints. It was perfect. The next morning, I sat at my desk, pretending to review schematics, my ears peeled. It didn't take long. First came the familiar startup chime of the game from Julian's office, followed immediately by a sharp, frustrated grunt. Then silence. A few minutes later, the chime again, then a louder, more aggressive sound like a keyboard being slammed. I allowed myself a small, internal smile. I saw him leave his office, a confused and annoyed look on his face, and head to the break room. My plan had worked. Every time he tried to launch his precious game, his entire computer would freeze, forcing a hard restart. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression, but the satisfaction was short-lived. Julian, being the master manipulator he was, didn't complain about his game not working. Instead, he marched into Mr. Albright's office, looking deeply concerned, and spoke of critical system failures and mysterious errors that were jeopardizing the Sterling Tower project. He claimed his machine was crashing randomly while he was working on vital client communications. Mr. Albright, a kind man who trusted his senior people implicitly, took the bait completely. He spent the entire afternoon in Julian's office, hunched over the keyboard, trying to diagnose the problem. I'd hear the pinball chime, then Julian's voice saying, "See, it just did it again." He never once mentioned the game. This went on for days. Mr. Albright, who should have been managing the firm, became Julian's personal round-the-clock tech support. He brought in outside consultants. They replaced the memory. They swapped the hard drive. Nothing worked because every time they left, Julian would try to launch the game and the cycle would repeat. The final resolution came a week later, not with a bang but with a memo. I found it on my desk one morning. Mr. Albright had concluded that our office was plagued by a deep, undetectable network instability, a phantom virus that threatened our core operations. He wrote that, for the security of our client data and the future of the firm, he had authorized an emergency top-to-bottom overhaul of our entire server infrastructure and workstations, a project with a cost that made my blood run cold. As I stared at the six-figure estimate on the attached quote, I saw Julian walk by, whistling on his way to get coffee. He caught my eye, gave me a friendly wink, and said, "Crazy times, huh? Glad the boss is finally taking our system's security seriously." And in that moment, I realized my small, clever act of revenge hadn't just crashed his game. It had crashed our entire company.